Welcome to the Membership Guys podcast. Kick-ass advice and tips for membership site owners.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 101 of the Membership Guys podcast. I'm your host Mike Morrison, and this is the show where we dispense proven practical tips and advice for growing a successful membership website. And the celebrations are just subsiding right now for episode number 100. We've had a week of celebrations for hitting that big milestone, and I thought for the first episode of the triple digits era, it makes sense, since we're celebrating a milestone for the podcast, to talk a little bit about podcasting. Podcasting is such a huge part of how we drive the growth of membersiteacademy.com, which, for those of you who know, that's our own membership site about membership sites, because we like to keep it meta. And if you're going to talk about how you are the membership guys, you kind of need to have a membership site, right? So with that in mind, I figured what better topic to talk about than why we think membership site owners should publish a podcast and how you can use it to drive the growth of your own membership. But before we get into that, I want to remind you guys that this show is brought to you by membersiteacademy.com, which of course we just mentioned there. Membersiteacademy.com is the number one place to be for anyone planning, building, launching, or growing a successful membership website. We've got an extensive library of courses, tutorials, and training. We've got member-only perks and discounts, monthly member Q&A calls that we do live. We bring in experts to do workshops for you. We show you behind the scenes of our own growth strategies, and we have a kick-ass community of supportive membership site owners that are there to help you to get where you want to go with your membership plans. And of course, we're in there helping out hundreds and hundreds of people just like you. So if you are serious about making your membership site a success, you need to head over to membersiteacademy.com. Alright, so let's talk about podcasting then as a membership site owner. Podcasts have made a significant resurgence in recent years. They never quite hit their full potential back when the technology first came in around about the mid-2000s. But in recent years, thanks to a number of prolific shows and thanks to a lot of mainstream brands and mainstream media companies really getting into the podcasting game, coupled with it being easier than ever to start your own podcast, this all makes for a great opportunity for membership site owners to really get ahead by incorporating podcasting into your content marketing strategy. So here's some of the main reasons that we feel you should consider using a podcast to promote your own membership site. First and foremost, it enables you to establish your authority and to build credibility. Now, many membership sites are based around expertise and authority. Members will join in order to not only gain access to your teachings, to the courses and materials that you create, and to the stuff that's been produced by people that they deem to be the go-to guy or the go-to girl in a particular field, but they'll also join to rub shoulders with those authority figures as part of their membership community. A podcast is a great way to demonstrate your expertise and to build up credibility with your audience, establishing yourself as an expert in your field and making you someone that other people want to learn from and want to rub shoulders with. So that's reason number one why you might want to look to use podcasting as part of your membership strategy, establishing your authority and building credibility, especially if that's something that your membership site is largely centered around. Another great benefit of having a podcast as a membership owner is that it enables you to show your personality and get people to connect with you. Personality is something which is very difficult to portray in the written word. Even the most charismatic people in the world could come across as complete dullards if you lack the ability to demonstrate that personality through writing. A podcast allows people to hear your voice, to hear the tone that you're using, and to get a better sense of your personality, who you are, your little quirks, and what makes you tick. You become far more relatable, and it makes your listeners feel like they're connecting with you far better than if they were simply reading another blog article. And this is something which has been supported by pretty much everyone that I've met at events, at conferences, at our member meetups who've listened to the podcast too. They already feel like they know me a little bit, like they can associate with me. They understand my tone of voice. They understand the type of person that I am because they've been able to listen to me for over 100 episodes. This can go a long way towards building a rapport with your listeners and creating that following who will then want to get to know you more, spend more time around you, and of course, the best way to do that is for them to join your membership site. The third big reason why you should consider adding podcasting to your membership strategy is that it enables you to connect with influencers. Building relationships with influencers in either your own market or in related areas can be a great way of expanding your reach and boosting your visibility. And inviting an influencer to be interviewed on your podcast is a fantastic way to start and establish those relationships. Podcast interviews come with a lot less friction for the guest than if you were to reach out to them to ask them to contribute a written blog post or come on a webinar. So you're far more likely to get a positive response, particularly if the person you're inviting frequently appears on other people's podcasts or even has one of their own. If you're looking to start to get some interview guests for your podcast, the best place to start is to look for influencers who have their own podcast, because then you know that they've got the mic equipment, you know that they understand the value of podcasting, and it's going to be far easier for them to just sit down and record an interview with you than it would be if they had to show up on a webinar or write a blog for you, because they're going to be fully equipped to hop into that interview with minimum preparation or hassle. Now, not only do expert or influencer interviews give you great content, you also get the rub of being associated with the big names in your industry. So people see you interviewing these influencers and they associate you with them. And if that podcast guest then goes on to share the interview with you with their own audience, that exposes you to people you otherwise wouldn't be able to reach. Some of the podcast interviews we've done here on the Membership Guys, podcasts with the likes of Chris Ducker, with Amy Porterfield, with Pat Flynn, with John Lee Dumas, those have been amongst our most popular podcast episodes, partly because of the subject being discussed, partly because of the person we've been discussing it with. So again, connecting with those influencers and having that association can do a lot of things for you in terms of visibility, in terms of credibility, and in terms of expanding your reach too. The fourth reason why you may consider throwing podcasting into your content marketing mix is to reach a totally new audience. Now, one of the most powerful things about podcasts is that they are content that is delivered to your audience, rather than content that your audience needs to visit your website in order to access. So, as podcasts are primarily accessed through services like iTunes, then there's a far greater chance that they'll be discovered by a whole new audience who otherwise would never have found you. And subscribers to your podcast will then just have new episodes dropped onto their device. So you don't even need to rely on them bookmarking your site or joining your email list or remembering your web address. Your content is taken and delivered to your audience, so it doesn't rely on them being proactive. And you can then use the content of your episodes to drive listeners to your website, drive listeners to your membership and so on, and encourage them to take that follow-on action. And that leads us nicely into the fifth big reason why membership site owners should utilize podcasting, is that a podcast is a great way to promote your membership site. The podcast format makes it easier to promote your membership in a far more natural way. It can sometimes feel a little bit awkward to jam in a promotion for your membership into the end of a blog post or even into a webinar. However, because your podcast is far more likely to have a bit more of a conversational tone, then the mentions of your membership can be a lot more organic. How many times have I mentioned membersiteacademy.com in this podcast episode and in past podcast episodes? Now, of course, we always have the little pre-recorded bits or the little specifically promotional bits where we talk about the membership. But just by nature of the subject I'm discussing and the fact we have a membership site centered around that subject in which we have members and a community who are discussing the sort of things we talk about here, just the fact that that is part of the mix means that on a lot of occasions, the things we're talking about, there is a proper, real reason to mention the membership that isn't just promotional. And that ability to mention your membership organically makes it far easier, makes it far more compelling to actually raise awareness of your membership, raise awareness of what you're doing, and ultimately drive people to potentially signing up. Now, of course, one of the main reasons that most people monetize their podcast is with sponsorships, where maybe they've got 2 or 3 points in their show, depending on how long it is, where they run a 30 to 60 second ad. Usually it's a podcast host reading a script, and they're plugging a sponsor product. And those sponsor products aren't always fully aligned with what's going on in the podcast. I recently spoke on a panel at Social Media Marketing World alongside Natalie Ekdahl, Amy Porterfield, and Shailene Johnson about using podcasting to promote a product. And I made a joke that happened to crack the whole room up, even though I thought I'd be the only one who found it funny, that the very popular podcast Serial is sponsored by MailChimp because nothing goes with murder quite like email marketing. And they actually cracked the whole room up because I think they figured that, yeah, that's absolutely right. There's no real link between the subject of that podcast and the sponsor's product. And you see that with a lot of sponsored podcasts. Now, when you're using your podcast instead to promote your membership, then essentially you can act as your own sponsor rather than promoting other companies. It is the perfect fit. The guys on Serial are never going to find an organic way of talking about MailChimp within the context of the content they're actually discussing. It's always going to be that disconnect where it throws over to a promo and then it comes back to the actual content. When your membership is essentially the sponsor of your podcast, you don't have that issue. Okay, so if I've convinced you that you should be taking podcasting seriously and you don't already have a podcast for your membership, then what do you need to do to get started? Here's my 5 quick steps for getting started with a podcast. First of all, decide on your format. Will it be just one host? Will you have multiple hosts? Will it be you giving snippets of advice and tips, 5 or 10 minutes long? Or will you have interviews? How often are you going to publish? Will you have any special features or segments? Figure out that format, what your content's going to include. Keep it simple. Don't overthink it either because you can always pivot and adapt. The Membership Guys podcast initially was never intended to have interviews, and it just so happened we tweaked things, we mixed things up, a couple of interview opportunities opened up that we thought would be good to have on the show, and now it's a mix. It's still primarily single host content. It's still mainly just me tackling a specific question or topic or problem, but we have a mix of the interviews as well. So step 1, decide your format. Step 2, figure out the branding. Come up with a name for your podcast and have an image designed. Remember, your podcast image will often display at smaller sizes in iTunes and on different devices, so don't pack it with too much text because people won't be able to read it. Avoid using cliched images like pictures of microphones or headphones and so on. If you can't design it yourself using a tool like Canva or something like that, then you can start out by just getting an image through something like Fiverr. I'm sure that a lot of graphic design aficionados will be rolling their eyes and clenching their fists at me mentioning Fiverr.com, but just to get you started so this stuff doesn't hold you up, that's a good place to turn. But if you want something higher quality, check out something like 99designs.com if you don't have the budget to hire an actual designer. Step 3, purchase your equipment. I can't understate the value of a decent microphone. If you're going to be podcasting from home, then you're probably going to want what's called a dynamic microphone because that eliminates all of your background noise. I'm a big fan of the Rode Podcaster mic, but there's a lot of other good alternatives out there. And if you throw a search into Google, what are the best podcasting mics, you won't have to look too far to find the right answer. I certainly recommend checking out a good friend of mine, Mr. Colin Gray, over at thepodcasthost.com. They have awesome guides on the best equipment that you need in order to start podcasting. So that's thepodcasthost.com, and I'll have the link to that in the show notes as well if you're looking for input and reviews and stuff of equipment. But as I said, we use the Rode Podcaster mic. I love it, and it's a dynamic mic so I don't get any of the background noise or anything else that's going on. Step 4, get the right software. You're going to need some software to record your shows. I record all of mine in Audacity, which is completely free if you do a Google search for it. It's Audacity, Audacity. You're also going to need a podcast hosting service like Libsyn or Blueberry. Personally, I prefer Libsyn. You might also want to use a service like Auphonic for cleaning up and optimizing the audio of your podcast. If you're going to be conducting interviews, typically you'll do these using something like Skype, in which case you'll need something to record the call. I recommend a piece of software called Ecamm Call Recorder. You can also use tools like Zencastr or Zoom. Zoom is becoming very, very popular as an alternative to Skype. It doesn't tend to have as many issues. And again, with all this stuff, I will have links to the different tools and stuff in the show notes. And then finally, step 5, add your podcast to the relevant podcasting services. The big place you're going to need to publish your podcast is, of course, iTunes. That's the big dog. However, it's also worth publishing to services like Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play Music too, in order to expand your reach, particularly to the non-Apple crowd. And what you'll find is those podcast hosting services I mentioned in the last step, especially like Libsyn, they'll have tools that enable you to basically publish once and distribute to multiple podcasting services at the same time. Now, if you are a member of MemberSite Academy, we have a full course in there called Attracting Members with Podcasting. So if you are a member, you can get that through the course library. That drills through a lot more of the strategy and a lot more of the details. And it also gives you the walkthroughs of the technology. It goes through different mic options. There's walkthroughs of recording, editing, submitting to iTunes, all that sort of stuff. So if you're a member, get yourself in there. If you're not, head over to membersiteacademy.com. Remember, that course is just one of multiple good things we have inside the Academy. And you'll see right there, proof positive of exactly what I've been talking about. It's an organic opportunity to talk about my own product on this podcast because the congruency and the link between the two things are there. So hopefully, everything we've been talking about here has given you some inspiration, some food for thought over the benefits of adding podcasting to your content marketing strategy as a way of driving new sales for your membership site. And of course, you have the entire back catalogue of the Membership Guys podcast to go through if you really want to look at how we're using podcasting as part of our own strategy. What I would say, though, is if you are binge listening through our archives, please do be sure to leave us a nice, shiny 5-star review on iTunes, on Stitcher, or wherever you're listening to this. Podcasters thrive on reviews. We need your reviews to get out there to more and more people and to share our good stuff with a larger audience. So hit us up with a review as well. We greatly appreciate it. And if you do, tweet me to let you know you've done it so I can thank you as well personally. That's it from me for this week. Hopefully you found this episode useful. Hope you've enjoyed it. And I'll be back again very soon with another episode of the Membership Guys podcast. If you've enjoyed today's episode of the Membership Guys podcast, we invite you to check out the membersiteacademy.com. The MemberSite Academy is the essential resource for anyone at any stage of starting, growing, and running a membership website. So whether you're still figuring out what your idea is going to be, or whether your website is already up and running and you're just looking for ways to grow it and attract new members, then the MemberSite Academy can help you to get to the next level. With our extensive course library, monthly training, exclusive member-only discounts, perks and tools, and a supportive, active community to help you along the way with feedback, encouragement and advice, the MemberSite Academy is the perfect place to be for anyone looking to start, manage and grow a successful membership website. So check it out at membersiteacademy.com.